The second trailer for Captain Marvel recently launched online and was full of details for fans to scope out. We got our first real look at the Skrulls and got to see Nick Fury interact with Carol Danvers' Kitty, among many other beats, such as this awesomeness. But the trailer also gives us our first look at Annette Bening's character. But just who is this person? If you look into the cast information, you'll see her character's name is missing, which of course opens the door to speculation. So who could she be? Before we dive into this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with ScreenRant. In the new Captain Marvel trailer, we get a brief look into the Kree Empire and Carol Danvers' backstory. Born a human, she ended up getting a blood transfusion from the Kree, which gave her out-of-this-world superpowers and made her one of the most powerful characters in the MCU. While she may have the blue blood of the Kree, she still appears human unlike the rest of the Kree, who have blue skin as well. But despite this, Carol isn't the only human-looking person in the Kree Empire. One of those characters is Annette Bening's mysterious character. The four-time Academy Award nominee ends up giving a little pep talk to Carol in the trailer, telling her that when the Kree found Carol, she had no memories of her own. So they made her one of them, and that with the power of the Kree blood, she'll live longer and be more powerful than she ever was before. Benning's narration only lasts for a few seconds, and we only get a brief look at her in the trailer. But it's enough to ramp up speculation, and the running theory is that Benning is, in fact, playing the Supreme Intelligence. Now, if you're a casual Marvel fan and don't really read the comics, you may be wondering to yourself, who the heck's the Supreme Intelligence? Thankfully, we have you covered there. The Supreme Intelligence is also known as the Supremer and was created more than 1 million years ago by the Kree. The reason the being is known as the Supreme Intelligence is that it's made up of a bunch of brains from the best and brightest of the Kree Empire. When those Kree pass away, scientists remove their brains and add it to the body of the Supreme Intelligence, allowing it to access the previous intelligence of the original person. The Kree would use the brains of philosophers, doctors, scientists, free thinkers, and other like-minded beings in order to make the Supreme Intelligence just that. Like so many comic book characters, it seems, the Supreme Intelligence got its debut in a Fantastic Four comic. Specifically, Fantastic Four Volume 1, number 64, which came out in August of 1967. But of course, the Supreme Intelligence plan got a little out of hand one day. In short, it developed its own personal mind as opposed to being made up of the minds of others. This allowed the Supreme Intelligence to start making its own decisions and executing its own plans, which, depending on which side of the fence you're on, may be the best thing ever or the absolute worst. It wasn't long until the Supreme Intelligence replaced all forms of government in the Kree Empire, and can you blame them? Why have a panel made up of various beings who would argue all day long and not get anything done when you have the Supreme Intelligence who can think beyond rationally and see the bigger picture? Of course, by seeing the bigger picture, the Supreme Intelligence was able to see that the Kree species had reached something of a dead end when it came to its evolution. They simply weren't going anywhere anymore, and the Supreme Intelligence wasn't having any of that. It saw the potential of the human race, which had evolved rapidly over the last few thousand years, and saw them ultimately as a threat to the Kree Empire. It tricked Mar-Vell, the Kree hero, and the character everyone theorizes is being played by Jude Law in the upcoming Captain Marvel film, and Rick Jones of Earth into sharing the Negabands, then surprised everyone by challenging them both to combat. The Negabands are 2 wristbands that grant the user great power, including super strength and interstellar travel, but when shared, the powers would be weakened. The Supreme Intelligence basically wanted to have both these heroes lose, and then have their minds ravaged and basically kill the Earth because it saw the Earth as a threat. But of course, this complicated master plan was foiled thanks to Rick Jones, and that episode came to an end. But now we know that the Supreme Intelligence may have it out for Earth in the Captain Marvel film. Perhaps it's allied itself with the Skrulls. But that wasn't the first time the Intelligence was trying to do something about the Kree's potential. During the Shi'ar War, it used a negabomb within the Kree galaxy in order to try and jumpstart some kind of evolutionary change in the Empire. It takes only one human brain to tell you that launching a bomb of that scale won't do anything except kill thousands and thousands of people, which is exactly what happened, leading to a faction of the Avengers coming in to execute the genocidal maniac. Well, this got dark pretty quickly. Of course, being a comic book character, the Supreme Intelligence didn't die because that's not how things work in comic books. It was captured by S.H.I.E.L.D., but quickly broke out of custody and found itself in Manhattan, where it proceeded to plan to launch another negabomb in the sewers. This intelligence has issues, seriously. So, could Benning be playing that character? Well, judging by all the secrecy around her and that in the trailer she seems to be a person of authority, we think it's not too crazy to believe that she's the MCU version of the Supreme Intelligence. Sure, she doesn't look like a giant head made up of brains, but that may be a bit too out there even for comic book movie standards. Don't forget, Guardians Volume 2 turned Ego the Living Planet into Kurt Russell, so having Benning's intelligence also be altered isn't that wild of a leap. Giving her a human form not only makes her more relatable to watch, but also gives her a direct connection to Carol, as they're both Kree with a human connection. In fact, with the Intelligence's obsession with evolution, perhaps she's the one who created the hybrid Kree human known as Captain Marvel. Only time will tell.
In 2019's Avengers 4, the heroes of the MCU will attempt to undo the actions of Thanos in this year's Avengers Infinity War. Come the end of Avengers 4, Thanos will surely be defeated, and as the MCU ventures into a new era, someone will need to take over for the prune-chinned villain as the franchise's new big bad. In this video, we'll be looking at the theory that Norman Osborn will be the new big bad. Guys, don't be ScreenRant's big bad. Remember to hit the subscribe button. It's the best way of keeping up to date with all of our great new videos. Norman Osborn is one of Marvel's most iconic villains. While many people will know him as Spider-Man's arch-nemesis the Green Goblin, thanks in no small part to Willem Dafoe's portrayal of the character in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, there is a lot more to him than that. In the comics, he's proven himself to be a more than worthy threat to not only the Avengers, but the entire Marvel universe. And there's a theory that could be the case going forward in the MCU, at least once Thanos is out of the picture. As far back as 2012, when the first Avengers movie was released, the Oscorp building was set to appear as an Easter egg alongside the likes of the Avengers Tower. But by the time the building was fully designed, the rest of the digital skyline was already rendered and its inclusion was scrapped. Of course, the most obvious reason for this theory is that Spider-Man has arrived in the franchise, and Norman Osborn tends to appear wherever the Webbed Wonder does. In order to differentiate Osborn from previous live-action versions of the character, the Green Goblin identity may well be ignored, with Osborn himself pulling the strings to torment the entire roster of MCU heroes. There's every chance he could actually start as early as 2019's Spider-Man Far From Home, as that could see the emergence of the Sinister Six, with Osborn funding them and telling them what they need to do. With the likes of Vulture, Shocker, and as of next year, Mysterio in the MCU, the potential Sinister Six roster is already half filled. And given that Hydra Man is also rumored to appear in Far From Home, the team is almost complete. But there's a more obvious sign that Norman Osborn is on his way to cause mayhem in the MCU, and it might surprise non-comic book readers to learn it came from 2017's Thor Ragnarok. At the end of that movie, Thor headed to Earth with what remained of Asgard's people, with a view of starting a new life there. Now, although Thanos killed off a lot of those survivors, not only do we know that some of them escaped the ship they were on, but time is likely to be reversed in next year's Avengers 4, so we might still see a big band of survivors heading to the realm they know as Midgard. In the comics when that happened, it was a key part of the plot of the Dark Reign and Siege storylines between 2008 and 2010, both of which saw Norman Osborn as a key figure. Given the events of those arcs, Osborn's introduction at this point could lead to the introduction of an evil Dark Avengers team. Or if time is reversed to the extent that Asgard's destruction in the MCU is undone, an invasion of Asgard by Osborn's army, which includes the likes of the Sentry and Osborn himself in the Iron Patriot armor. And that would be pretty cool, right? It was 2008 and 2009's Dark Reign storyline that saw Osborn calling himself Iron Patriot and putting together a new team of Avengers, the Dark Avengers, using mostly supervillains in disguise so he could go about his villainous business undercover. The story saw Osborn's rise to national power, including taking over Tony Stark as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. It would be awesome to see something like that in the MCU, especially with the Dark Avengers as part of the plot, as it'd be something never seen in the franchise, which is quite hard to achieve these days, given all the crazy things we have seen. Perhaps we'll see Phase 4 of the MCU bringing the Dark Avengers into the franchise gradually, then having them joining forces and acting as a team in Phase 5, essentially mirroring the way the original MCU Avengers were assembled in Phase 1 over the course of 6 movies. The Iron Patriot armor already exists in the MCU as we saw it in 2013's Iron Man 3, and Ares was confirmed to exist when we saw his visage on the Grandmaster's Tower of Gladiatorial Champions in 2017's Thor Ragnarok. Having characters like the incredibly powerful Sentry in the MCU would take the franchise to another level. And the idea of potentially seeing evil versions of Hawkeye, Spider-Man, and Captain Marvel in live action all played by supervillains in disguise is an awesome one. But who would you want to portray Norman Osborn in the MCU? Bryan Cranston? Matthew McConaughey? Michael Shannon? Someone else? Maybe you could leave a comment to let us know your ideas. Obviously, at this stage, there's absolutely no guarantee that Norman Osborn will be the next big bad in the MCU, and we have no current way of guaranteeing what his plans would be if he is. But there's certainly a good chance of it happening based on this undeniably convincing evidence, and we would be more than content with him taking over from Thanos, given what he's capable of and what new things he'd offer to the franchise. But there are plenty of other great villains who could do the job just as well, so we won't be too disappointed if this theory doesn't end up coming to fruition. In this year's brilliant Avengers Infinity War, Thanos came out emphatically on top against the combined efforts of the MCU's heroes. The Mad Titan wiped out half of all life in the universe with a snap of his fingers, after having acquired all 6 of the powerful Infinity Stones. In Avengers 4, however, the heroes will launch a counter-assault on the prune-chinned villain, and we're very curious to find out how that will turn out for him. In this video, we'll be theorizing what Thanos' ultimate destiny is in the MCU. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to keep up to date with all of ScreenRant's great new videos. The entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is currently mourning the loss of half of its population. The Mad Titan Thanos succeeded in his quest to cull 50% of all life in existence when he snapped his fingers in Wakanda, having turned himself into a faux god by obtaining the power, space, reality, soul, time, and mind stones. At the end of Avengers Infinity War, the purple-skinned intergalactic despot retired to a peaceful planet to live out his promise to watch the sun rise on a grateful universe. But he certainly won't have peace for long. The movie's sequel in 2019 will see the remaining heroes of the MCU rallying to defeat him and to undo what he did in Infinity War. And we can't wait to see how it all goes down. But what exactly will happen to Thanos? He's currently chilling, reveling in his victory, but what is his ultimate destiny in the MCU? Let's theorize just some of the possibilities about that. The first and most obvious possibility, and the one that most of us are expecting to happen, is Thanos will get his comeuppance and be killed in Avengers 4, as the Avengers and their allies go all out to get him back for what he did in Avengers Infinity War. Thanos killed off, albeit probably temporarily, a huge number of popular and established MCU characters, and it would be most fitting if one of them was to return to life in order to end his. Or, if not one of the characters who died, one of them who was affected particularly badly by the snap. The most likely candidates to finish Thanos off include several original Avengers like Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, or Hulk, high-profile relative MCU newcomers like Spider-Man or Doctor Strange, his daughter Gamora, who he originally sacrificed to obtain the Soul Stone, or the yet-to-be-introduced Captain Marvel, given that she's said to be the most powerful hero ever to appear in the franchise. Wouldn't it be particularly satisfying to see Iron Man, Thor, or Hulk finish Thanos off? Iron Man took his own blade to his stomach courtesy of the Mad Titan, Thor saw his brother and best friend killed at his hands before failing to land a killing blow on him at a pivotal moment in Wakanda, and Hulk was beaten down by him in a way never seen before. Even though it would be hugely satisfying to see Thanos get what he deserves in Avengers 4, he is such a great character that we'd undoubtedly miss him once he was gone, which leads us to another theory on how he could quite literally disappear from the MCU. It's entirely possible that Thanos will get a taste of his own medicine and be completely erased from existence in the next Avengers installment. It's more than likely that the movie's plot will involve the heroes of the MCU working to gather the Infinity Stones for themselves, whether that means forcibly taking them from Thanos or traveling through time to collect them before the villain ever manages to get his massive purple hands on them. If indeed that is the case, once all 6 have been collected, one of the heroes could then do exactly what Thanos did in Avengers Infinity War and snap their fingers, with the aim being of erasing Thanos from existence and possibly bringing everyone back who had previously been erased. You have to imagine if it was someone like Tony Stark or Steve Rogers, the power of the Infinity Stones would kill them. They're only human after all. So perhaps it would be left to someone like Thor, the Hulk, or Captain Marvel, someone who has a level of enhanced physical toughness that renders them capable of wielding such power. Regardless, a universe in which Thanos literally doesn't exist would feel like a much safer one for the heroes of the MCU, at least until potential new threats emerge, which, let's face it, would be inevitable. Of course, given how popular Thanos is, there's every chance he could survive to fight another day. And what could that mean for his ultimate destiny? Well, there are several possibilities on that front. First of all, he could end up being imprisoned, which would arguably be the outcome he'd hate the most given that he seems to consider himself above the other characters. Should the heroes of the MCU manage to relieve him of the Infinity Stones, they might be able to find or create a prison strong and secure enough to hold him. Maybe, for example, it would be something in the mold of the cage created to hold the Hulk, which ultimately ended up temporarily holding Loki imprisoned in 2012's Avengers movie. But the most likely potential Thanos captors are more powerful than the characters we've already met in the MCU, and they come in the form of Marvel's cosmic entities. In the 1991 Infinity Gauntlet comic book arc, after Thanos had snapped his fingers and erased half of all life in the universe, the most powerful beings in existence did indeed intervene. And although their intervention failed in the comics, should they succeed in the MCU, they may choose to imprison Thanos for eternity for his crimes. And that might mean he's tortured for eternity as well, which wouldn't seem overly harsh given how much suffering he's caused others throughout his life. On a similar note, he could end up being banished to a place where he'd no longer be considered a threat to the wider universe. One of the many concepts that are expected to play a big part in Avengers 4 is the quantum realm, which we've already seen in the Ant-Man movies and are expected to see more of in 2019's Captain Marvel movie. And there is a very good chance that the heroes of the MCU could trap the Mad Titan there. It would be fairly easy to do, assuming they can relieve him of the Infinity Stones first to prevent him from using them to escape. They'd simply need to hit him with one of Scott Lang's shrinking discs and shrink him to subatomic size. Thanos would be so small that he'd be sent to the bizarre realm that Janet Van Dyne had been trapped in for 3 decades, and he would be completely unable to affect the normal world from there. There are also several other places they could banish him to. Doctor Strange could use his magic to send him to another dimension, for example. Again, this would require the heroes taking the Infinity Stones from Thanos' possession first, as he might be able to traverse dimensions if he has them. Or, if the heroes can get their hands on the Infinity Stones, they could find a way to trap him inside the Soul Stone, in Soul World, as the orange-tinted realm is known, and force him to live out his days stuck inside an item he coveted for years, which would be extremely ironic. Of course, the danger of either imprisoning or banishing the Mad Titan is that eventually he would escape and continue to wreak havoc on the universe, so it might not be the best idea. Even if Thanos doesn't come out on top in Avengers 4, thanks to the fact that he's such an interesting character, he could continue to be a scourge of the MCU's heroes going forward. Tom Hiddleston's Loki was the villain in 2011's Thor movie, but he went on to be the villain in 2012's Avengers movie in spite of the fact that he was defeated the first time around. Then, despite losing in his attempts to conquer Earth in the Avengers, he was back on our screens in Thor: The Dark World, Thor: Ragnarok, and Avengers: Infinity War, and that was all because the fans had such a good response to him. Given the fans had taken to Josh Brolin's Thanos in the same way, the same thing could happen with him. There are plenty more stories from the comics in which Thanos was the main bad guy, all of which would make for incredible movies, so there's still plenty of potential for him to be a major character going forward. There's also every chance he might opt to do exactly what he's doing right now in the MCU, live the life of a retiree on a farm on a distant and remote planet. Granted, he's currently happy doing that because he won in Avengers: Infinity War, but if he accepts defeat at the end of Avengers 4, he may admit that he's been beaten by worthy opponents and be content to go back to his farm in spite of a loss. It is, after all, what he did after he was defeated in the Infinity Gauntlet comic book arc, so there's certainly precedent for the Mad Titan doing exactly that. Finally, the least likely destiny for Thanos, but certainly not one that we can rule out, is he actually goes on to win in Avengers 4, with the heroes of the MCU failing in their attempts to defeat him. Of course, we know the likes of Spider-Man, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, and the Guardians of the Galaxy will be returning going forward in the franchise, so the characters who turn to dust will be coming back, but that doesn't mean Thanos will definitely lose. There could be a bargain, a deal of sorts, that brings those characters back while keeping Thanos happy, and it could result in something absolutely heartbreaking happening. It was very obvious the original 6 Avengers were among those who survived the snap in Avengers: Infinity War. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Bruce Banner, and Black Widow were all left standing when their allies turned to dust. And we're aware that Hawkeye will play a significant part in Avengers 4, so we know he definitely survived too. And given that we're expecting to lose at least a couple of the original actors as their contracts with Marvel Studios come to an end, there's a big chance that those 6 characters could trade their lives to bring back those who lost theirs in Avengers: Infinity War. Avengers Infinity War used the line "we don't trade lives" on a couple of occasions, and that could have been foreshadowing the exact opposite happening going forward. If that does happen, Thanos would still be considered victorious, and he'd still be satisfied that half of the universe had been culled, meaning he'd leave the remaining heroes alone, at least for the foreseeable future, allowing a new big bad to emerge in the franchise in the future. Of course, there have been some arcs in the comics that have resulted in Thanos having to put his differences with Marvel's heroes aside and join forces with them in order to face off against an even more powerful threat than himself. And although we really can't see that happening in the MCU, you can never say never about anything in such a crazy franchise. Whatever Thanos' ultimate destiny is in the MCU, it is sure to be an interesting ride, just like it has been so far. Whether that ride comes to an end in Avengers 4 or continues for a while longer after that, there's no doubt that any character who takes over him as the franchise's big bad will certainly have very big shoes to fill, both literally and figuratively, and we can't wait to see Josh Brolin reprising his iconic role in 2019.
Hey guys, it's your friendly neighborhood ScreenRant again. It's now been confirmed Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, will be the main villain in next year's Spider-Man Far From Home movie. There is, however, a theory he'll be working on behalf of someone more powerful than himself. And in this video, we'll be discussing why that's the case and who his master could be. With great videos come great responsibility, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's the best way of keeping up to date with all of ScreenRant's great new videos. Academy Award nominee Jake Gyllenhaal will be playing Quentin Beck in Spider-Man Far From Home, and we're really excited about seeing him. In the comic books, Mysterio is a special effects and illusion expert, a master hypnotist and magician, a chemist and roboticist, as well as an exceptional hand-to-hand combatant who is skilled in the use of weapons. However, in comparison to Spider-Man, his physical attributes are categorically feeble, and he mainly has to rely on his mind and his other skills to take the webbed wonder on. That won't make for a particularly action-packed movie, so there's a theory he'll actually be working on behalf of another, more powerful character in the MCU. So who could that be? Well, we have a few ideas. The obvious one is Adrian Toomes. Toomes was played by Michael Keaton in 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming, and Keaton will be reprising the role in Far From Home. Although he's currently in jail, and at the end of Homecoming it was implied that he didn't want to hurt Spider-Man, he might have had time to fester, and if he changes his mind, he might have someone on the outside do it for him, potentially triggering the formation of an MCU Sinister Six. Toomes has a lot of financial muscle, so hiring other bad guys to work for him or alongside him going forward isn't out of the question, and Mysterio could certainly be one of them. In any universe with Spider-Man in it, however, there's always a chance Norman Osborn could be pulling the strings, and that certainly applies in the MCU. He could be the one telling Mysterio what to do. In fact, he's most likely to be the one putting the Sinister Six together in the MCU, and it could be him who gets to Adrian Toomes when he's in jail to convince him to join his team alongside Mysterio and go after Spider-Man again. Most excitingly about Osborn's potential emergence in the MCU, however, is the fact that he could go on to be the franchise's big bad once Thanos is defeated. And given the comic book arcs which could be adapted to the big screen, it's an amazing prospect. Another potential character who Mysterio could be working for is the god of mischief himself, Loki. Granted, Tom Hiddleston's character supposedly died in Avengers Infinity War, but you just never know what to believe when the infamous trickster is concerned. Moreover, the fact that time travel is set to become a thing in the MCU means any deaths could be undone anyway. And with Loki set to get his own series, we're bound to see more connectivity between the popular character and the wider MCU. But the biggest reason we think this particular relationship is plausible is because both Loki and Mysterio are masters of illusion. Who better to teach Mysterio how to create illusions than the character whose magic focuses on them? Loki said to Thanos he had experience on Earth, but his time spent there on screen has been very short. Perhaps he's spent more time there than we might think, developing relationships with prominent figures around the globe. Another potential mystical idea is Mysterio will actually be working for Dormammu in the MCU. In the comics, Quentin Beck has crossed paths with Doctor Strange before, so there is a precedent for him being embroiled in the world of magic. And Marvel Studios do like changing up their characters from the source material, so maybe Mysterio will be a servant of Dormammu, just like Caecilius and his zealots were in the Doctor Strange movie. Jake Gyllenhaal has been seen on set wearing a cape that isn't too dissimilar to Doctor Strange's Cloak of Levitation, which suggests it could have mystical properties properties, and the color scheme is also very similar to Dormammu's in the MCU. Spider-Man has run afoul of the powerful Lord of the Dark Dimension in various media before, including in the comics and the Webbed Wonders 1990s animated television series, so it wouldn't be the first time he's done so, in spite of the fact the two characters come from very different worlds. And it would certainly be an unexpected twist for a Spider-Man movie to be the source of Dormammu's reemergence in the MCU. But the most exciting potential character that Mysterio might be working for is definitely the Mad Titan himself, Thanos. Spider-Man Far From Home follows directly on from Avengers 4, quite literally, as it's said to pick up just moments after the Infinity War sequel ends. And if Thanos isn't permanently killed off, there's every chance he could have further influence in the franchise going forward, starting with him being Mysterio's master. The prune-chinned intergalactic despot now knows just how powerful some of Earth's heroes are, and if he wants to exert his influence on the planet in the future, he may recruit allies to help him do that, especially once he loses possession of the Infinity Stone, and having already seen his armies and children killed off. In fact, given that he's currently in possession of the Time Stone, Thanos could quite easily retrospectively exert his influence on Earth, and we might find that going forward, he has countless minions working for him on Earth. Heck, he's actually proven to be a very popular character, so there's no reason he won't still be a major player in the franchise after Avengers 4. Regardless of who we think Mysterio might end up working for, it's hard to see him being enough of a threat to Spider-Man on his own, at least in any kind of way that would make things entertaining for MCU audiences. That being said, maybe he'll surprise us. Perhaps he'll be a totally kick-ass character who's far more powerful than he's typically depicted in the comics and other sources. Maybe he won't need a master after all. If that does turn out to be the case, you certainly wouldn't see us complaining. The more awesome villains the MCU has, the better, quite frankly.
Even though Thanos may have erased half of the universe in Avengers Infinity War, Marvel is ready to pack Avengers 4 with even more heroes, and possibly some new villains as well. Besides the purple-skinned Thanos, one huge rumor making the rounds is the inclusion of Galactus. But how is this possible, and how would the cosmic entity fit into the story? Well, we're here to tell you. Want more Marvel news and theories? All you gotta do is click subscribe. You'll join our notification squad and be among the first to know of new ScreenRant content. The Marvel Universe may feel a little bit empty after the deaths of characters like Loki, Gamora, Star-Lord, the Black Panther, and Spider-Man. But don't worry, the Avengers 4 will not be filled with scenes of our favorite heroes sitting at shawarma restaurants mourning their lost friends. Plenty of new heroes will join the fray, including the long-absent Hawkeye, Ant-Man, and Captain Marvel. On the villain side, we expect Thanos to return, but does Marvel have plans to introduce a second villain, perhaps in the form of Galactus? In the comics, Galactus is known as a cosmic entity and is one of the oldest living things in the entire universe. His appearance in the comics has varied over the years, but typically features a tall vertical helmet and a whole body of armor. The villain's main purpose is to consume planets to help sustain his life, basically making the finger snap seem more like a kick to the shin than anything else. With a villain so powerful, how could Marvel introduce him into the crowded story? Well, it's rather simple actually, by flipping Thanos. The Avengers already spent a whole movie trying to defeat Thanos to no avail. Does Marvel really want viewers to spend another movie trying to reach the same goal? A much bigger impact could be seeing the Avengers figuring out a way to reverse the snap and defeat Thanos early on in the film. This is when the surprising arrival of Galactus would take place. With an even bigger threat out there, Thanos' humanity would shine through once again, just like it did with Gamora, and Thanos would reluctantly team up with the heroes to destroy Galactus and save the whole universe. As comic book fans know, basically taking out all life in the universe is nothing new for Galactus. He has a special weapon known as the Ultimate Nullifier, which is capable of erasing an entire multiverse. Now that's one weapon Rocket Raccoon would probably love to get his hands on, and all things considered, probably shouldn't. Alright, now let's calm down a little bit. Maybe Thanos teaming up with the Avengers and becoming all buddy-buddy isn't the most realistic scenario. For a more realistic appearance of Galactus, consider the post-credit sequence of the Avengers 4. Marvel spent years building up Thanos and Phase 3 of the MCU, so what's next? Instead of waiting to find out, Marvel may give us a tease of where Phase 4 is headed with a post-credits glimpse of Galactus. The inclusion of the character would help build Marvel's vision of more cosmic movies and could tie in with the space themes featured in the upcoming Captain Marvel. Either way, an appearance from Galactus would definitely have people talking and give the MCU a whole new direction once the Thanos and Infinity Stone storyline has finally come to a close. Are you ready for another big bad in the MCU? Should Galactus be the one who one-ups Thanos? And is there anything that we might have overlooked or possibly just not talked about in this video? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to ScreenRant here on YouTube for more awesome videos just like this one. Thanks for watching!